You've just seen how a binding constraint shapes the entire design and how to defend your choices when someone pushes back. Now we apply the same discipline to a different scenario, a multi-agent research system. The constraints have shifted, so the binding constraint is different, and that changes everything. We'll work through what's new, produce a design that satisfies all the rules, and practice defending it when the trade-offs are challenged. Let's jump into the next scenario. By the end of this module, you can a second scenario with a different binding constraint, identify what changed versus scenario A, produce the design, and defend it. Here is how this module builds up. Scenario reading is a method for extracting the binding constraint from a situation description. It is not about recalling a pattern from a playbook. The distinction people get wrong is thinking they need to know the right answer in advance. You do not. You need to identify the one limit that makes some approaches impossible, and then choose among those that remain. Without scenario reading, architects pick the approach they are most comfortable with, not the one the situation demands. In production, that leads to systems that miss latency targets, blow cost budgets, or fail compliance audits. The cost is rework, missed deadlines, and eroded trust. This step prevents that by forcing you to name the constraint before you name the solution. Take this scenario from the worksheet. Read it once without highlighting. Then ask, what is the one thing I cannot change? That is your binding constraint. Maybe it is a hard latency limit, a data residency requirement, or a cost ceiling. Now list the approaches that could work within that constraint. Reject any that violate it, and for each rejection, state the reason explicitly, not just "I would not use that," but "I reject a routing classifier because it bypasses the language understanding you are paying for." Finally, accept a trade-off. If you chose a simpler model to meet latency, you gave up some accuracy. The other cases in the document follow the same pattern. Work this one fully and the rest will make sense. The durable rule is this: before you make any design decision, state the binding constraint out loud. When you reject an option, give the reason it loses, not its name. Rejecting a routing classifier is trivia, rejecting it because it bypasses the language understanding you are paying for is the lesson. And always document the trade-off you are accepting. No architecture is free, make the cost explicit so your team can agree it is worth paying. On the exam, this appears as a scenario question. You will be given a situation and asked which approach fits. The distractor is almost always a familiar, well-known pattern that violates the binding constraint in a subtle way. Your job is to spot the constraint first, then eliminate any option that breaks it. This is testcraft. The exam is checking whether you reason from constraints, not whether you recognize a pattern. Constraint analysis is the practice of identifying the binding constraint in a scenario and mapping every change to what it eliminates. It is not a checklist of features. It is a reasoning tool that stops you from carrying a solution from one problem into another where it does not apply. The distinction people get wrong is treating it as a comparison of surface details rather than a shift in what the system must guarantee. Without constraint analysis, you build the wrong thing. In production, a multi-agent research system that inherits the enforcement gate reflex from a banking scenario will add latency and cost for a control that serves no purpose. Worse, if you let agents pass prose summaries instead of structural provenance, the final report will contain citations that were invented during synthesis. That undermines the entire point of a cited report and erodes trust in the system. Take the first change, multiple agents with isolated context. That rules out any answer that assumes shared memory or inherited context. If you propose a design where the synthesis agent relies on a summary the search agent wrote in prose, you have already lost provenance. The alternative is to carry source references structurally through every handoff. The other three changes work the same way. The cited report rules out prose handoffs, unreliable sources rule out averaging, and the absence of irreversible actions rules out the enforcement gate. The rest are on the page. The durable rule is, before you design anything, name the binding constraint. Then list every way this scenario differs from the last one you worked on, and for each difference, ask what class of answer it eliminates. If a difference does not rule something out, it is not a constraint. When you reject an option, give the reason it loses. Rejecting a routing classifier is trivia, rejecting it because it bypasses the language understanding you are paying for is the lesson. This is testcraft. The exam gives you 6 scenarios, and 4 of them exist to catch you carrying an answer from a previous one. The most common distractor is the enforcement gate. It will appear as an option in scenarios where nothing is irreversible, and if you do not run constraint analysis, you will pick it because it felt right in scenario 1. The other trap is provenance. Any answer that passes pros between agents in a cited report scenario is almost certainly wrong. Design under constraint means you impose rules on your multi-agent system that force it to surface what it knows and what it does not. It is not about making subagents excellent in isolation, it is about making the coordinator verify that the whole topic is covered, that every finding is attributable, and that the report honestly names its gaps. The distinction people get wrong is thinking this is about agent quality. It is about system-level honesty. Without these constraints, you get the silent coverage failure. The coordinator splits a topic into 3 subtasks, the subagents all return results, and the synthesis weaves them into a coherent report. It looks great. But no one checked whether those 3 subtasks actually covered the topic's domains. In production, that means a deployed system producing reports that users trust, while missing entire areas of the subject. The cost is credibility, and, in high-stakes domains, real-world harm from decisions made on incomplete information. Take a coordinator receiving the topic impact of remote work on urban economies. A naive decomposition might produce 3 subtasks: office vacancy rates, downtown retail, and commuting patterns. That looks reasonable. But the domains of this topic also include the local tax base and labor migration. The coverage rule forces the coordinator to identify those domains and check that the proposed subtasks cover them. It rejects the naive decomposition and adds subtasks for tax base and migration. Then it launches all subagents in parallel, multiple task calls in one response. If a subagent times out, the coordinator receives the failure type, the attempted query, and any partial results. The rest of the cases, the finding schema, the synthesis instruction, the coverage annotation, are on the page. The durable rule is, coverage is a domain check, not a subtask count. Before you decompose, define the domains of the topic. Then verify that your subtasks cover them. Findings must carry provenance, claim, evidence, source, published at, because without it, you cannot distinguish well-established from contested. Launch subagents in parallel in one response, and handle timeouts by capturing the failure type, the attempted query, and any partial results. Synthesis may compress language, but it must never drop provenance. The author rejects a fixed-order pipeline not because it is technically wrong, but because it bypasses the coverage check that prevents the silent failure, a report that looks complete while missing most of the subject. This is tested by giving you a scenario and asking for a one-page design. The distractor that catches people is the fixed full pipeline coordinator. It looks complete because it defines excellent subagents and a clear handoff order, but it lacks the coverage check. The exam wants to see that you constrain the coordinator to verify domains, not just to produce subtasks. This part is testcraft. Know that the absence of a coverage rule is the tell for the wrong answer. Design defense is the practice of pricing a proposed change rather than restating the objection. It is not about saying no to every suggestion, it is about forcing the conversation to acknowledge what is being traded away. The distinction people get wrong is treating it as a list of rebuttals. A real defense names the specific failure the change introduces and the exact condition under which you would accept it. That second sentence is what separates architectural judgment from stubbornness. Without design defense, systems drift toward polished dishonesty. The failure this prevents is subtle: a report that reads smoothly, cites confidently, and never admits weakness, but is wrong in ways nobody can trace. In production, that means a decision maker acts on a finding that was never actually supported, or ignores a risk because the annotation that flagged thin coverage was removed for looking weak. The cost is not a bug you can catch in testing, it is a slow erosion of the system's reason to exist. Once the output cannot be stood behind, the whole architecture loses its value. Work through the first challenge. Someone says structured findings are verbose, so let agents write prose and cite at the end. The call is to reject this. The reason is that citing at the end means the model must reconstruct which claim came from which source after composing free prose, and that reconstruction step is where citations get invented. The model will hallucinate a plausible reference rather than leave a gap. The alternative loses auditability. You cannot stand behind a report if you cannot trace its assertions. The cost you accept is verbosity. Structured findings take more tokens and read less elegantly, but that structure is the artifact that preserves the mapping. The remaining 3 challenges follow the same pattern and are on the page. The durable rule is, when someone proposes a change that makes the output look better, ask what truth is being sacrificed. Do not restate the objection, price the trade. Say what specific failure the change introduces and what you are paying to prevent it. The author's document rejects 3 of 4 challenges because they trade honesty for polish, dropping the coverage annotation, letting agents write uncitable prose, and blindly picking the newer source. In each case, the reason is not that the change is impossible, but that it removes the very property that makes the system trustworthy. That rule holds outside any exam and will be true in a system built next year. This part is testcraft. The exam will present you with a challenge that sounds like a reasonable optimization: reduce verbosity, cut latency, resolve a conflict cleanly, and the distractor is the answer that accepts it because it makes the output look better. The exam consistently scores the honest version. The signal they are looking for is the 2-sentence structure: you named the cost, and you named what would change your mind. Answers that only restate the objection without pricing it will not get full credit. Let's lock in what matters. First, always read the blueprint first. It shows where the marks are, not the scenario text. Second, the binding constraint changes every time, so carrying over a previous design will cost you. Third, a coordinator that runs all subagents in a fixed order produces the guide zone failure. And finally, when you defend your design, reject any request that trades honesty for polish. That's what separates a pass from a fail.